Relations between Saudi Arabia and the United States have been strained of late. That after OPEC Plus decided to slash oil production, and Washington has not held back in its rebuke of the kingdom. US President Joe Biden told CNN that Washington must rethink its relationship with Riyadh. It was particularly stinging because of Mr. Biden's efforts just months earlier to repair ties with Saudi Arabia. The US president was welcomed on the tarmac by the kingdom's ambassador to the US, Princess Reema Bandar. She was also the only Saudi woman in the room with the president during his highly anticipated meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Well, Princess Reema took on the role of ambassador at a particularly low point in Saudi-US relations. It was mere months after Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. She had a tough task of mending relations back then, and it seems like she's back at it now. I sat down with Princess Reema bin Bandar in an exclusive interview to discuss all of that and the kingdom's role in energy security. I started by asking her to describe the tone of current Saudi-US relations. Have a listen.
It's clear we're at a point of disagreement. And obviously that comes from the decision of OPEC Plus to cut the production of oil. And I would have to just remind people it was a decision made by 22 countries based on an economic survey that understood that there's going to be a downturn. Many people have tried to politicize this, but you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. This is not political. This is purely economic, based on the expertise of 40 or 50 years of mapping and trends. We do not engage in the politics of anyone. We engage simply as a balancer and a stabilizer of the economy through the energy market, as we've done historically.
Well, let me provide as a counter-argument to that the White House perspective. The White House has accused Saudi of siding with Russia. Is the kingdom siding with Russia?
You know, the kingdom has a policy of engaging with everybody across the board, those we agree with and those that we disagree with. The relationship that we had with Russia is what allowed us to free prisoners of war, 2 Americans, 5 Brits, 1 Croat, and a selection from other countries. We view our role as a mediator and a communicator. We've supported Ukraine humanitarianly. We have given over 400 million. We collaborated with Ukraine and Poland to give 10 million to allow for the refugees that were coming out of the Ukraine and spilling into Poland a safe landing. That's what we do. That's the value of our engagement. Is it siding with Russia? No. We voted with the United Nations twice to condemn the annexation and condemning the incursion. We absolutely view the decision by OPEC as non-political. And if you look at the markets, Becky, what happened? They're stable. They're stable.
Well, the White House says the kingdom knows the decision will increase Russian revenues and blunt the effectiveness of sanctions. Have you personally spoken to the administration about this? What's the communication
I deal very regularly with the administration, and frankly, it's an administration that I have profound respect for. I have only had the most gracious and direct communication, as we should. That's how partners communicate with each other. And by the way, it's okay to disagree. But the important thing is recognizing the value of this relationship. Our relationship, by the way, is more than the sale of arms, and it is more than the exchange of oil. It is about the people-to-people relationships, and you're going to see it at the FII. The number of U.S. businesses that are working here, why, Becky? Why are they here? Altruistically? No. Opportunity. Today. And you've seen it.
Joe Biden, the US president, says that there will be consequences for the actions taken by Saudi as a lead member of OPEC. Several lawmakers have touted a number of punitive measures, the stopping of arms selling to the Saudis and pulling US troops out. What is your message to Joe Biden and to those lawmakers? And how concerned are you about these consequences?
You know, I hear a lot of people talk about reforming or reviewing the relationship with the kingdom, and I think actually that's a positive thing. This kingdom is not the kingdom it was 5 years ago. It's not the kingdom it was 10 years ago. So every piece of analysis that existed is no longer relevant. We are a young population. We have young leadership. We have an aspiration and a goal to engage with the world in a way we never did before. And the transformation that's happening in the kingdom is one the world should bet on. Because it will not only transform us, but it will create this other pillar of hope that is coming from a very dark region.
You recently argued in an op-ed for Politico, which I thought was fascinating, that relationship should take on a new form. And let me just quote you here. You said, "Long gone are the days when the US-Saudi relationship could be defined by the outdated and reductionist oil for security paradigm. The world has changed, and the existential dangers facing us all, including food and energy security, climate change, cannot be resolved without an effective US-Saudi alliance."
When we're coming to America and we're saying, we're your partner in energy holistically, it means we want to do business with you. We want to invest in your companies. We want to make you as good as we are, and we want to have this next chapter of clean energy as a partnership. Because what would that look like? That's the future, Becky. This argument about OPEC is today because the world is tense. But it's not the conversation of the future.
In the second part of our discussion, we talked at length about her time growing up in Washington when her father, Prince Bandar, was the ambassador there, and what she learned from that experience. He held the post there for more than 2 decades. Well, Princess Reema is the first Saudi woman to serve as an ambassador, and she took on that position in the States at what you could only describe as an unenviable time. The relationship was fractured. It was in the wake of Jamal Khashoggi's killing and amid the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Well, prior to taking on that role, the princess, a member of the Saudi royal family, had been an advocate for women's rights in the kingdom, an issue that sits at the heart of Vision 2030, the Crown Prince's ambitious plan to modernise and diversify this economy. Well, Princess Reema has championed a lot of reforms in the kingdom, but she doesn't shy away from the fact that there is still a lot more to be done. Take a listen. You are no stranger to the US Capitol. You spent years there when your father was the then ambassador, Prince Bandar. How did your time in Washington as a youngster inform who you are now?
Living in Washington, D.C., and particularly in diplomatic circles, and we were there for 23 years, from when I was 7 years old to 30. You're immersed in something that you don't even know is happening. The people that surrounded us, the conversations we listened to, the things my father included us in, at that time I honestly didn't appreciate that I was watching history happen. And that's so important when you're dealing with the relationship of the United States and the kingdom. If you don't contextualize it in history, you will not understand why it's important that we remain strong and steady and cool-headed in this partnership that's been 80 years, and the next 80 years can be magnificent if we allow it.
Can you really be more hopeful about a more effective alliance going forward?
I can. Becky, I can, because there are things within Vision 2030 that the kingdom has invested in that I feel the world isn't seeing. Number one, yes, we are one of the largest oil producers in the world, but the kingdom is reframing itself to be one of the largest energy producers. We have put billions of dollars in investments in renewables, solar, wind, anything you could possibly imagine, we're betting on it. Why, Becky? Because the kingdom within Vision 2030 has an initiative called the Saudi Green Initiative, which is our gift for the next generations, not just of our country, but of the world. And we are doing it in balance of the oil market, because you cannot walk away from one until the other is ready. And by the way, our commitment is to have 50% of our domestic energy needs met by renewables by the end of this decade. Not 50 years from now. Now.
That narrative that says here in the kingdom, Vision 2030 aligns success with sustainability, has been met with some skepticism.
Correct. Fair enough. Why? Because it takes time to build these things. It takes time to transform. It takes time to reform. You know, a lot of people talk to me about, are the reforms true? Are they true? Well, I have to tell you honestly, Becky, I left the United States in 2005 where they were still arguing about gun control and abortion rights and healthcare, and I came back in 2019 to the same conversation. And I leave a kingdom where in 5 years we've had more change than we've had in 80 years, where women's rights are at the forefront, where female inclusion is at the forefront. And have we finished? No. We've designated 2030 to be a point that we want to aim to get the maximum done, but guess what happens in 2030? The next round of change has to happen because the next generation comes up and says, thank you, but here are my needs. We are simply getting ourselves caught up with the world. And you have to give us time because transformation, doesn't happen in a day. The United States had a 200-year journey of transformation. We've had 80. We're different people in a different place, and we are going to get there because we believe in the same thing. We believe in the sense of opportunity for our people, and we're very proud of the changes that have happened.
Before you took the role as ambassador to Washington, for a decade between 2008 and 2018, you agitated for the rights and freedoms of women here. You have been transformative in the issue of women's empowerment here. Describe some of the challenges that you faced and the significance to your mind of this change, because it has been very recent.
It has. And it is not out of modesty or humility when I say the word we versus the word I. When I was in the private sector, yes, I will take credit for the things I did. And you can call it agitate, but for me it just felt like common sense. It was common sense to have women in the department store. It was common sense for me that women should drive. It was common sense for me that women, when they speak about their health and well-being, should be able to talk about breast cancer as breast cancer because it is simply that is the disease, and we shouldn't have to mute ourselves when we talk about our own bodies and our own health. I was hired February of 2016 in the Ministry of Sports. Why? They said, Reema, you seem to have access to women. I said, yes. Yes, I do. And they said, would you be interested in coming here and helping us design the mandate for female inclusion in sports? And I said, I don't know what that means because obviously, again, whoever knows me knows I'm not really athletic. That's not really my domain, but female inclusion is. Creating opportunity and access to it is my domain. And my recognition was, this is the time to step out of yourself and join the world that's giving you an opportunity, because either I stay out of government and I get frustrated and complain, or I join and say I will take on the burden and share the burden with those who want us to change.
Is that empowerment trickling down quickly enough?
It is, because I may be the first female ambassador. We have 2 more in Europe. We have a permanent representative at UNESCO. We have CEOs. We have women at Tadawul, which is our stock exchange. We have female doctors, architects, archaeologists. We have female baristas. We have shop owners. We have entrepreneurs. They're in the military. They're in firefighters. It's shocking, Becky. And it's amazing.
Just give me one moment in time over that period of time, before you became ambassador, before you took yourself back to Washington in a new and different role, one moment that you are most proud of?
I think one of the most special moments was when women were allowed to enter the stadiums for the first time for a soccer game. And I don't know if you know many Saudi women, but we are avid sports women. We cheer our teams as if our lives depended on it. And to walk into that room and see the faces of women peppering the stadium, I have never felt more joy, because they were finally having the experiences that everybody else has in the world, in their own country.
How do you square the empowerment of women here with what feels like a drip feed of arrests of women for using their social media in what seems like a very mild dissenting way? We are talking about 2 cases recently, one of 34 years for a young Saudi woman who's a PhD student in the UK, and another of 42 years. Just explain.
So, in the journey of reform, some reforms are faster than others. Some regulations have been adjusted and some haven't. And in that process of reform, I think whatever it is that these ladies have been accused of has not been addressed yet. But I will tell you, their cases are under review. I believe they're under appeal. And I do believe that the system will correct itself if that's what's necessary. And
because this is harsh and unreasonable, doesn't it?
I can see that. I absolutely can see that. But Becky, when I balance out the change that's happened for women in the kingdom, I could look at the United States and say, children are being shot every day in schools, in malls, in grocery stores, places we're supposed to feel safe. But I don't look at the United States of America and say, I feel threatened, I feel at risk. I recognize that there are certain things that need to change. That doesn't take away from everything that we've done, but it is definitely, I would have to say, it's an obstacle. It's a challenge, and we will face it.
Do you lean into Dad?
Do I lean into
advice?
Dad? Yes, I do. I do because I'd be a fool not to. And the history that he has made, that he has been part of, and the journey that he had was something that's written about in books. But Becky, I always have to remind people, I'm his daughter. And yes, I come back and I'm in the United States in the role he was in, but I don't come back as Bandar bin Sultan. I come back as Reema bint Bandar. And I begin my journey and I launch myself through my experience, through my own skills that have been developed and honed, through his tutelage, through my experiences with him, and I rely on that profoundly.